So, better days are coming. I would like for you guys to stay prayed up, stay being yourself, love one another.
For 18 months, the fighting in that house was constant. Yelling, crashing, nonstop conflict. Everyone heard the arguments. But when the violence finally came, there was only one sound that truly mattered: a single, isolated gunshot. The question isn't why the grandmother pulled the trigger, but why a family living under the same roof allowed the tension to get so loud that no one heard the quiet warning. A grandmother, a mother, a daughter, 3 women connected by family, and supposed to be connected by love. We all think of this bond as special, a place for advice, comfort, and peace. This family tie should be the safest place in the world. But what happens when that family tie breaks? What happens when your own home feels like a trap? When family love turns into a nonstop fight, the pain is huge. Today, we look at a true story that makes us ask tough questions about the places we live. It shows us that sometimes the biggest danger is right inside your own door. This is how one house in Arizona turned love into a fatal tragedy. Welcome to True Crime Cave. We don't just tell stories here. We look closely at why things went wrong, so you can keep yourself and your family safe. We believe that learning from the past is the best way to prevent sadness in the future. Hit that subscribe button right now and join us as we try to find the hidden dangers in our everyday lives. This story happened in Buckeye, Arizona. It's a sunny, fast-growing suburb near Phoenix, where a lot of families move to find houses that cost less money. The location tells us one thing: these women were living together because they had to, not because they chose to. The house itself, a simple, single-story home near 254th Avenue and Carson Drive, looked totally normal from the outside. It had all the pieces of a house: walls, a roof, and rooms. But a house is just a building. A home is a place that feels safe and peaceful. For the 3 women living here, this house stopped being a home a long time ago. It was a stressful situation caused by money problems, full of old fights and bad feelings. It was a cage, not a safe place. And in a home where stress builds up like this, every wall and every room becomes a silent witness to a tragedy waiting to happen. To understand the tragic crime, we must first truly grasp the painful reality of the 3 people involved and the absolute breakdown of their family connections. This was not a simple 3-way argument. It was a war fought on 2 fronts against one person. At the head of the household was Debra Greene-Davis. At 71 years old, the grandmother was the official matriarch, but she was deeply frustrated. She was constantly battling to keep her dwindling authority over her own space and the family finances. She wasn't seeking peace. She was seeking control. And in her fight to assert dominance, she found a powerful, willing supporter. That supporter was Larkeya's mother, a woman in her 50s. She wasn't a neutral peacekeeper caught in the middle. Instead, she frequently united with her own mother, the grandmother, to face off against her daughter, Larkeya. Their shared stress over money and the cramped living situation created a common enemy. And tragically, that enemy was the youngest member of the household. The mother and grandmother turned their combined anger, frustration, and worry directly onto Larkeya, creating a crushing, constant sense of being ganged up on. And then there was Larkeya Elliott. At 31, Larkeya was full of energy, ambition, and clear goals. She was a woman fighting to build a future, but she felt completely trapped by the 2 women who were supposed to be her support system. Because the grandmother and the mother were constantly standing together in conflict against her, every day became a bitter, exhausting battle just to be heard. Larkeya didn't feel loved. She felt outnumbered, misunderstood, and constantly judged for her lifestyle, her job, and her attempts to gain freedom. Her home was an echo chamber where her every move was met with criticism from a united front. Three strong wills, all forced into one small space because of dire money issues. They fought relentlessly over bills, who used what space, and who had the right to make the rules. It was this cruel dynamic, 2 against 1, that destroyed any hope for peace and ultimately created the final, volatile explosion. To understand the tragedy of Larkeya Elliott, we have to look outside that unhappy house and see the woman she was trying to become. Larkeya was not lazy. She was driven. She worked as a corrections officer at Lewis State Prison in Arizona. Think about what that job demands. It takes a tough person. It requires discipline, strict rules, and a huge amount of self-control. When you work inside a prison, your main job is to keep a lid on things. You have to handle arguments, stop fights, and calm down the most volatile situations. Larkeya was trained to see a problem starting and shut it down before it turned violent. She understood boundaries, order, and the need for clear rules. She carried this high level of professional focus with her every day. Here is the crushing irony of her life. Larkeya had the skills to manage a prison yard, but she couldn't manage her own living room. She was a master of de-escalation at work, where she had authority, but she had zero authority in her own home. She could find peace and stability dealing with hardened criminals, but she found only chaos and judgment from her own mother and grandmother. The prison job was more than just a paycheck. It was her shield. It was her source of identity and independence. It showed the world and herself that she was capable, strong, and organized. But every evening, she had to take off that uniform and walk back into the one place she couldn't control. She took off her power and stepped back into the pressure cooker. When police looked at Larkeya's belongings after the shooting, they found a clear picture of a woman living 2 lives. They found a mix of objects that told her secret story, a story of fighting for love and fighting for a way out. One part of her life was full of career goals and plans for future. She had notes about what she wanted to achieve, where she wanted to go. This was a hopeful Larkeya, the one who saw a life free from tension. But right beside those notes were angry, honest journal entries about her family. These pages were filled with pain, with the corrosive feeling of being unloved and misunderstood. It was a silent diary of the corrosive battle she was losing every day. This conflict, the push between her ambition and her confinement, was tearing her apart. Larkeya's other escape was physical. Her gym membership card showed she went regularly. This wasn't just about fitness. This was about survival. The gym, the running. It was her way to burn off the stress, the anger, and frustration that built up at home. It was her mental escape route. She was trying to outrun the pain that lived at 254th Avenue and Carson Drive. This is a real point of empathy. Larkeya was fighting 2 very different battles. She was fighting at work to make a paycheck and a life, and she was fighting the silent, heavy battle of feeling unappreciated and constantly judged every time she walked back into her own house. And sadly, the fight she was best prepared for, the one at the prison, wasn't the one that ended her life. The tragedy wasn't a sudden event. It was a final, devastating chapter of a long history. The arguments in this house were not new. They were constant. They were the silent trauma that wore everyone down. The mother and grandmother had their own issues, but they often aimed their combined frustration at Larkeya. Over the last 18 months, neighbors heard the shouting. They heard the door slam. They even heard objects breaking. The sounds of physical aggression slowly creeping into the family's life. Police have been called 4 times. Think about that. 4 times. The neighborhood knew, the police knew, and the women inside the house knew this was not normal, but no one, including the family themselves, found a way to stop it. This constant tension is the great lesson here. An environment of escalating conflict acts like poison. It slowly destroys a person's emotional health and judgment. When fighting is normal, the line between yelling and violence disappears. The women stopped seeing the warning signs because the arguments had become the daily routine. They were living in a constant state of emergency. This is a central lesson we must take away. When you let conflict become the atmosphere of your home, you set the stage for something much worse. You destroy the spirit first, and that broken spirit can quickly lead to physical danger. The lack of peace in that house didn't just make them unhappy. It made them unsafe. And because they couldn't separate and find a way to quiet the storm eventually took a life. The truth is, this tragedy didn't come from nowhere. It wasn't a freak accident. The house near 254th and Carson Drive had been flashing bright red warning signs for over a year. The women inside were living on borrowed time, and they were all ignoring the clear signals. The first and most serious red flag? The police. Official records show that officers have been called to home 4 different times before the day of the murder. 4 times. Think about that. For separate times, the fighting inside was so out of control that someone, likely one of the women, felt the need to call law enforcement just to make it stop. These weren't just simple disagreements. These were public, dangerous eruptions that the law had to step in and handle. But even more concerning than the police calls was the loaded gun. Debra Greene-Davis, the grandmother, kept a semi-automatic handgun inside the house, and not locked away in a safe, but stored carelessly in a chair in her bedroom. A loaded weapon, easily accessible, was sitting right there in the middle of a constantly exploding family argument. It was a clear, terrible recipe for disaster. Where the atmosphere was fire and the gun was fuel, they lived with this danger every single day until it was too late. We look back at cases like this and wonder how anyone could have missed the signs. But when you're living it, those red flags can just become part of the wallpaper. If you were a neighbor or a family friend, or even one of the women inside, what would you have done differently? When is it time to stop arguing and start packing? Drop your best advice in the comments now. What is the single most important red flag that tells a person they must leave a situation immediately? The violence finally came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, December 15th. For Larkeya Elliott, the day had already started badly. She was carrying a heavy secret pressure. She had just received some disappointing news about a job opportunity she was hoping for. That dream of independence, of finally moving out and escaping the home's tension, had just been pushed further out of reach. She was tense, frustrated, and looking for a fight without even knowing it. The argument began, as these things always do, over something small and stupid. The trivial trigger, a missing phone charger. Larkeya wanted to charge her phone, and she couldn't find the cable. She immediately pointed the finger at her mother. A simple, "Did you take my charger?" quickly turned into a fight that dug up years of hurt. The words went from talking about the charger to talking about respect and trust. Larkeya felt her mother was constantly interfering. Her mother felt Larkeya was constantly blaming her. The mother fired back with her own deep resentment. And soon, both women had forgotten all about the missing cord. They were throwing insults and character attacks that had been stored up for months. They were no longer arguing over an object. They were arguing over their entire relationship. This is the point where the environment takes over. The small problem didn't matter anymore. The toxic atmosphere of the house, the one created over 18 months of silent trauma, took over the argument. turning a tiny spark into a massive bonfire. The air in that house was so heavy with old anger that any small breath of conflict was enough to make explode. The fighting moved fast. The shouting turned into shoving. When a piece of furniture, perhaps a lamp, crashed to the floor, Debra Greene-Davis, the grandmother, retreated. She ran to the supposed safety of her bedroom. At 4:10 p.m., she picked up her phone and dialed 911, asking for someone to stop the fight. But the violence followed her. Larkeya went right after the grandmother, and the fight became 3 people scrambling in a tiny room. As the 911 dispatcher listened, Larkeya was fighting both women. Court papers confirmed that Larkeya punched her 71-year-old grandmother in the head and shoulder. At the same time, Larkeya's mother jumped in, trying to separate them by grabbing her daughter's hair and pulling backward. All 3 women were tangled up, desperate, and completely out of control. Debra, feeling utterly defeated, pinned against the wall, felt trapped and terrified. She wasn't thinking about training or rules. She was thinking only about ending the immediate threat to herself. She reached down, not for her phone again, but for the most dangerous object in the house, the loaded handgun resting nearby in a chair. She later told police she simply thought seeing the gun would make them stop fighting. It was a final, tragic choice born from months of uncontrolled fear. She raised a weapon, pointed it at her own granddaughter, and pulled the trigger. The fighting stopped instantly, but the cost was everything. The irreversible line had been crossed. The loud chaos, the shouting, the punching, the wrestling, all ended in one sharp sound, a single gunshot, and then a complete, terrifying silence. That bullet instantly cut the fighting and the arguments. The violence was over, but something much worse had begun. Larkeya Elliott collapsed, struck by the bullet fired by her own grandmother, Debra Greene-Davis. The mother, who moments before had been fighting with her daughter, now stared in horror. Her anger was gone, replaced by pure panic. She scrambled to help, desperately trying to stop the bleeding. It was a futile effort, an act of raw instinct that couldn't fix the damage done. And then there was Debra. In the shock that followed the blast, she finally spoke the words that confirmed the horror. She didn't deny it. She didn't run. She confessed the terrible truth. I shot my granddaughter. Her fear, her anger, her desperation, it had all exploded into one single, fatal choice. The anger of years had given way to an irreversible loss, and a grandmother's life was destroyed along with her granddaughter's. Within minutes, the sirens were screaming toward the house near 254th Avenue and Carson Drive. The police were here, but they weren't arriving for a domestic disturbance this time. They were arriving at a homicide scene. When the officers reached the front door, they didn't rush in. Instead, they took control, shouting clear commands for everyone inside come out. This is a moment of cold, hard reality. The family home was now a dangerous place. Larkeya's mother, a woman who had just seen her own mother shoot her child, walked out first. She was detained by the police right there on the sidewalk. She wasn't free. She was a witness in a murder investigation. Inside, officers quickly found the victim. The scene in the bedroom was too tight, too chaotic. So they made the call. They pulled Larkeya outside of the street and began emergency CPR. Think about that powerful image. The fight for a young woman's life happening right on the grass and pavement of an average American street. The ultimate loss of sanctuary. The home had failed her, and now, even the efforts of first responders failed. Larkeya Elliott was officially pronounced dead shortly after. The case against Debra Greene-Davis moved quickly. She was taken to jail, charged not just with a crime, but with second-degree murder. This is an important legal point. When police questioned Debra, she admitted something crucial. She said that during the fight, she did not believe Larkeya was a deadly threat to her or anyone else. That admission changed everything. It meant she hadn't acted in immediate, necessary self-defense. She had acted out of rage and desperation, which is why prosecutors moved forward with a serious murder charge. At 71 years old, the grandmother appeared in court, likely wondering how a fight over a phone charger led to this. She was held on a massive $500,000 cash bond. For an elderly woman with no criminal history, the legal reality is stark. A conviction means a life sentence, spent behind bars. Her home is gone. Her future is gone. Her granddaughter is gone. It brings us to a final thought on this family disaster. Is the legal system providing true justice here, or is this just another layer of tragedy added to the loss? No one truly wins. We want to know what you think. Share your perspective in the comments below. What outcome is truly right for a case born from years of family stress? We have walked through the entire history of that house near 254th Avenue and Carson Drive. We have seen how a shared space, meant for comfort, became a battleground. And now, we must look closely at the total final cost. This case delivers two massive, painful losses that we must all recognize. First, the obvious and terrible loss, the loss of a life. Larkeya Elliott lost her potential, her career, her chance to achieve the independence she fought for. Her entire future was wiped away in 1 second of rage. A life of training and ambition ended not in a prison yard, but in her own family's home. Second, the equally crushing loss, the loss of the home and the peace. The financial asset, the property they fought to share, is now a crime scene. The mother lost her daughter, and the grandmother lost her freedom. The house is worthless to them now. It is nothing but a permanent symbol of pain. This is a clear, unforgettable lesson of this tragedy. When you allow constant argument and confrontation to be normal in your home, you will eventually lose everything. You will lose the respect, you will lose the peace, and you run the horrifying risk of losing a life. The noise and the fighting became so normal that they all forgot how precious silence and safety are. We want everyone to be able to live with love, but if you cannot, there is only one safe answer. We have to be honest about our limits. The greatest act of love and respect you can show your family is knowing when to say, "We must separate." If you are struggling with family members and you are finding it impossible to live together in peace, if the fighting is constant, if the yelling is a daily sound, you must make a plan. You must separate for a while. You must live in different places until you can learn to coexist without violence. Property is not worth a life. The financial cost of moving out is nothing compared to the cost of a funeral, a legal defense, or a lifetime of regret. If you lose the space, you can get more space later. If you lose your life, there is no second chance. The moment a house stops being a home, it becomes a danger. You must prioritize peace over proximity. You lose the house, but you save the family. You lose the tight space, but you save a life. If any part of this story felt like looking in a mirror, if the tension, the stress, or the constant fighting is part of your life right now, please take action. There are resources available to help you separate safely and find peace. Do not become another tragedy we have to cover on this channel. We want to hear from you. If you're struggling with a family conflict right now, tell us one small, practical step you will take today to find peace or separation. Your advice in the comments section could be the single piece of wisdom that saves another viewer's life. Thank you for watching and learning with us. Please like this video if you believe peace should always come first. Subscribe to True Crime Cave for more lessons on life and safety. Until next time, stay safe and choose peace over forceful habitation.